Sure.
I think I'm overthinking some of these concepts.
Okay, rise of nationalism and totalitarianism, Russia, Italy, and Germany. So we're not going to go into too much, but let's talk about the background of Russia. As you guys know, Tsar Nicholas was leader at the time, but he wasn't doing too well. Great losses to Japan, especially during World War I strikes, made him very unpopular. As you guys know, his family was largely tricked by Rasputin, and in the October Revolution, his government was ultimately overthrown. 1905 is when you see the beginning of that revolution. It won't ultimately be overthrown until much later. Fun story about Rasputin is that guy was poisoned, stabbed, drowned, shot, and then eventually he dies. So it takes some time.
Is this on your website?
Yes.
Agreed.
Yes.
Which is where the whole legend of Anastasia and he was really a warlock.
Yeah, and all that fun stuff. Yeah, but no, the entire Romanov family was killed. I mean, when they wonder whether or not anyone got away, no, they killed the entire Romanov family. They rounded them all up, brought them in the house, and shot them all because they didn't want any links to the family. In any case, the Bolshevik Revolution really takes control in 1917. So one thing that people always forget is that we were fighting the war even though we had deposed the Tsar already by 1905. The thing, though, is that by 1917, the Communist Revolution really takes place. The Bolsheviks, they take over, led by Vladimir Lenin. And the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is when the Russians leave World War I. The Bolsheviks, anyone know what the term Bolshevik means, by the way? Bolshevik? It refers to the majority. So, eventually they will fight a war. The Bolsheviks, they are the majority. They're also the Reds versus the Whites.
So Tsar was how long was he a dictator for?
The Tsar, I mean, they've been around for hundreds of years. I mean, Tsar Nicholas II was just in a line of hundreds, or maybe tens at least, of kings by that time. So again, it was a monarchy for hundreds of years. So the Bolsheviks were Reds, and they eventually enter a civil war with Whites. The Whites are the Mensheviks. And the Mensheviks are not communists. They're just people that want democracy. They're just people that want capitalism. They just didn't like the idea of having a king. But they want just a representative government. Whereas the Bolsheviks said, no, we want communism. We want redistribution of wealth. And so the civil war occurs between the Reds and the Whites, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, over what type of government we're going to establish in Russia. Yeah.
I feel like that makes the war easier for the people in power, though. If you have Reds versus Whites, but they both want to overthrow the...
They did actually join forces before. So in 1905, when they first had that revolution, there was only one group.
Oh, okay.
They got rid of the Tsar,
Okay.
and then the Bolsheviks, they came to power and said, wait a minute, all that's changed is that instead of a king, you have these bourgeoisie in charge. The poor are still poor. And so when Lenin comes to power in 1917, he launches this revolution of the poor against the wealthy classes. And so, again, it erupts into the Civil War, the Reds versus the Whites. After World War I, the U.S. actually assists the Whites during World War I. And so this is why the Soviets actually distrust the U.S. It's because the U.S. actually assisted the Whites during the Civil War, which is why the communists did not like us thereafter, which is why Stalin did not trust America, which is why Lenin did not trust America, because we did not like communism, and we were willing to kill them if necessary. And so Lenin begins his new economic policy where you have government-controlled economy. I mean, pretty basic stuff. Some private-owned, but not very much. I mean, this is an attempt at a true communist country, which is going to fail pretty miserably. It just doesn't work. I mean, not in a large scale anyway. Eventually, Joseph Stalin will come to power, forming the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And one of the things that he will create is the FiveYear Plan. As many of you guys know, the FiveYear Plan was designed to do what? Why did we create the FiveYear Plans? Anyone know why we created the FiveYear Plans?
Boost the economy?
Huh?
To boost the economy?
Yeah, to catch up to Europe. Right? So pretty much, Russia was the most backwards country of all the Europeans. They were by far, the most backward country. And so the reason why we really could not contribute to World War I is that our economy was so backwards. We were mostly agricultural while the rest of Europe was industrializing. So the 5-year plan was these great leaps, very much like the Great Leap Forward that Mao copied from the 5-year plan, was these rapid industrialization moments where we were going to focus on producing goods rather than agriculture. Obviously, what we do, though, is in order to make sure that farms become a little bit more efficient, we do collectivization as well. And collectivization is when we, what do you call it? They're farms, collective farms. And the basic idea is that this is the best way to make farming as efficient as possible. Let's control the farms centrally as well. Instead of having individual farms, all these workers will farm together. And it's all controlled by the government. And if you don't do well, he'll put you in a gulag. Or he'll just straight up kill you. The 5-year plans had a very negative impact on the Soviet Union because they pretty much starved their own people. They said, instead of producing food, let's produce toasters. Instead of producing food, let's produce guns, weapons, helmets, clothes. The idea was to give the appearance of success. Whether or not people were eating or not was not the issue. And so when we look at Joseph Stalin later on, and we talk about how many people that Hitler killed about 9 million. Stalin, including World War II, actually not even including World War II, ended up killing about 23 million of his own people. Just through starvation and just torture. Just killing them.
Well, why though?
Why? Because 20 million people were killed during the war. It's like, we don't have enough people, so we're just going to throw you at them. During the actual reign domestically, he killed anyone that was unwilling to see him eye to eye. I mean, he literally erased people from history. When Lenin was first in power, Stalin was maybe, 7th or 8th in line? Not even close to being Lenin's best friend. As he slowly moved his way up, because he was in charge of the Politburo, which is kind of like the propaganda arm, he began to kind of erase people from history. And then as he came to power, he was like, oh no, Lenin wanted me to do this. And once he did come to power, he actually changed all the history books. Lenin and him were always best friends. And Trotsky was never a guy, and Bukharev was never there, and all these people were never in existence. So he actually does, out of paranoia, out of fear, he actually eliminates people, and he actively goes out killing any political dissidents. People starve to death to give the appearance that he is succeeding economically. So it's pretty brutal. He kills a lot of people.
The difference is, though, he had more of an open hatred for everybody versus Hitler, who kind of specified. I mean, he hated everybody too, but he specified.
Yeah,
genocide.
Hitler was, again, very much nationalistic. I have pride in the Aryan race. This guy was, anyone can stab you in the back at any time, just sheer paranoia. Hitler was more like, I'm doing what's best for the country. He was doing what was best for him. Italy had Mussolini in charge. He is actually the first fascist. People always look to Hitler as being, the key guy. Sure, Hitler was the more successful one, but Mussolini was the guy who came up with this notion of fascism. Complete state censorship, complete and absolute power. Pretty much it's super nationalism. Okay, it's extreme nationalism. And so it really also doesn't work with communism. Those guys don't get along. Because the idea is that in communism, there is no government, whereas in fascism, the government has all the power. Now, obviously, Stalin was doing it wrong in communism because Stalin was like, I have all the power, this is communism. That's not how communism is supposed to work. But in any case, fascism was like the absolute power belongs to the state. They're going to promote the nationalism of the country. They're going to make sure that they govern us, whether in society, morality, how our family operates, language, that kind of thing. So complete and control. Yeah. What is it? Came to power with black shirts and women prestige lost in the TOV. Oh, Treaty of Versailles. Treaty of Versailles. And so then we have Germany. Again, you really don't have to know Italy. Germany's and Russia are the guys you gotta know. Germany's economy went to crap. In 1918, you can buy a loaf of bread for 63 Deutschmarks, or 63 cents in Deutschmarks. By 1922, once the war was over, 163 Deutschmarks. By 1923, 250 Deutschmarks. by 1923 July, if you look at that, it's a 10% increase already in Deutschmarks. By September 1923, 1.5 million Deutschmarks, and by November 1923, 201 billion Deutschmarks to buy one loaf of bread. Again, they just burn money, because what's the point? You use it as fire. And really what it came down to was that there was so much expectation that Germany had to pay off the debt that they said, okay, we'll pay it off by just printing money. But you can't do that. You can't just print money without backing it up. And Germany's economy was not thriving because the Allies would not let it. The Allies still controlled their industries to recover their own economy. And so this was one of those situations where Germany was just screwed. They had no way of improving their own economies. And so Adolf Hitler comes to power, slowly but surely. And obviously, you guys know the story about how he's an art school failure. He dropped out. People wonder if maybe that's the reason that he became a dictator, because he was angry. But he did serve during World War I. And he creates the Nazi Party, which is just pretty much a nationalist party. It's extreme nationalism. And a lot of people were angry with the Treaty of Versailles. Because if you remember, under the Treaty of Versailles, there were two things that the Germans hated about it. The Treaty of Versailles did two horrible things, which I think were just stupid ideas. Number one, war reparations. Germany was expected to pay for the entire war, even though it was not Germany's fault alone. Russia, England, France, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, they were all responsible for that war. And so when he say undo the Treaty of Versailles, the first thing he wants to undo is the war reparations. That was ridiculous to have to force them to pay. The second thing the Germans did not appreciate was the war guilt clause. There was an expectation that Germany had to accept blame for the entire war, which again is not the case, because they were not the only country militarizing. They were not the only country building an alliance system. They were not the only country with imperialism. They were not the only country that was nationalistic. All the other six powers that joined in World War I were all complicit in those kinds of actions. So it's really unfair to suggest that Germany was the only one.
He was right.
Yeah, he was right. I mean, he really was right. Germany had every right to be angry.
Yeah.
I really wish he didn't take these means to kind of address those concerns. But again, the argument is that World War II was just a carryover of World War I. It's really just one big war because it was unresolved. One quick thing is that when you talk about the causes of World War I, I might as well just throw this in here right now. We talk about the main causes of World War I. MAIN. It's an acronym. It's militarism, alliance system, imperialism, and nationalism. I'll go over those again. But militarism, alliance system, imperialism, and nationalism. We refer to those four as the main causes of World War I. And it's a nice little acronym there, but it's the main causes of World War I. And we do need to go backwards a little bit to kind of be aware of that. But the main causes of World War I were one, militarism. Again, arms buildup for every other country. So that's what's happening at that time. Alliance system. If you remember the alliance system of World War I, you had the British, the French, and the Russians with a secret alliance. And then you had the Ottoman Empire, Germany, and Austria-Hungary with the other secret alliance.
Is that the first one? The first group is the Triple Entente, right?
That is correct. And then the other side is Triple Alliance. So that's the Entente. And that's the alliance. The problem with the alliance system was that when Russia declared war against Germany, we had no idea that Germany was allied with the Ottoman Empire and Austria-Hungary. So that was a problem. And when Austria-Hungary declared war on Russia, they had no idea that England and France also had a secret alliance with Russia. And so really the alliance system was a problem, not because they had an alliance, but that because the alliances were in secret. So that's one of the biggest problems of World War I, is that we had a secret alliance system. Had we known that Russia had two friends and Germany had two friends, it would have been likely that they would not have gone to war, because they would have realized that going to war would have created this massive conflict. But they didn't know. So they went to war, and then 10 days later, Germany declares war on you, and Austria-Hungary declares war on you. You're wondering what is going on. So that's alliance system. Yeah, no one knew that was going to happen. Imperialism, pretty much are just competing for colonies. I mean, every other country was competing for colonies in Africa, Asia. So it's a global, pretty much playing Risk. And these countries were trying to conquer the world, and so global domination was kind of the goal of or imperialism. And then nationalism, these countries they felt they deserved to rule over Europe. So ultimately that's what it comes down to. Those are the main causes of World War I. Yeah.
I never really understood the blame the Jewish community for oppression.
So we'll get to that. But everyone good with main of World War I? That's kind of just the caveat. We'll talk about Treaty of Versailles and stuff later also if you want. And so again, he was anti-communist because he felt that this is not the best economy. You need a strong government. You don't want us to get rid of government completely. He didn't like the idea of democracy either because that clearly was not working. It was democracy that got us to the Treaty of Versailles. It was democracy that agreed to that horrible treaty. He didn't like religion because, again, just like Marx, he believed was opium to the masses. It was not going to work out. And loyalty to the states, militaristic and military state. Again, how are you going to control the government with a strict military? Now, the question that Doral had was this idea of blame Jews for depression. Why? Ultimately, Jews historically in Europe have been bankers. It's just the way it's been. Even from the very beginnings, Jews have just historically been bankers. They traveled a lot, they carried money, they were able to exchange monies, and so up even until modern European history, many Jews were just bankers. And so they believed that the reason why the entire economy was crashing was that the Jews were doing a horrible job managing the U.S. economy, and that they were hoarding all the money for themselves while the rest of Germany was suffering. So again, it was a conspiracy theory that the Jews actually were keeping all the money for themselves while the rest of these real Germans were suffering. And also the idea that if you are a Christian, then the Jews killed Jesus, and so many others just kind of jumped on that bandwagon as well. So you see the emergence of totalitarianism, which is pretty much a form of 20th century dictatorship. They become police states, where what you say and do will be regulated by the government. There is no freedom of speech. It's a one-party system, so don't worry about outlaw all ruling parties. It's a one-party system, because there's only one way. There should be no debate. There should be no discourse. It's we know what's best. I know you don't agree, but you're wrong. And eventually you'll see why we're right. And if you don't, we'll shoot you in the head. This was welcomed by a lot of people. This idea of we'll tell you what's right, we'll tell you what's best, we know what's good for you. Because this was the Great Depression. It was a global depression, and people saw their governments failing them. Nothing was working. So when a man named Hitler comes in and says, follow me, I know what I'm doing, society will go my way, I promise you prosperity, and he sounds confident about it, you would follow that man. You would go and say, okay, you know what, I have nothing left. Why not? Let's go, and you're going to promise me stuff? Cool. And so that's kind of what happened.
Not agreeing with what he said, but he was a phenomenal speaker.
He was a great speaker.
He really was.
And in a period in which people were still pretty cold, quiet, calm, it was kind of, pat and blase. You weren't really allowed to whistle because that was kind of like, who the hell do you think you are? I mean, a man who could come out and just speak emotionally and, rise up the emotions of your people and say, you deserve better. I mean, he was playing on the emotions of the German people. The German people said, yeah, why don't I deserve better? He says, well, I'll tell you, the Jews. And they're like, oh, well, okay, if you say so, why not? And he was offering them inclusivity. You can be a part of this. And so the people, lacking no leadership from the Third Reich said, okay, I'll jump on your bandwagon. He was secular. Actually, all of these religions were secular. All these governments were secular because religion kind of strayed away. Because, who are you going to listen to? The leader of your government or God? And God kind of tells you not to kill your people, and God kind of tells you to be nice to your neighbors. And so religion really got in the way. And again, emerge in economically backward areas that have been humiliated and distrust. Again, this is really what it comes down to. Is that you get the disenfranchised first. You get those that are angry and says, I can offer you something better. I can offer you a better life. Follow me. Like, okay, what do we got to do? Just put on a black shirt. Do what I say. Okay, you got it, Hitler. You got it, Stalin. You got it, Mussolini. And it's that easy. You get a bunch of angry kids to follow you. I mean, how do you think gang members do it still? Same way. They're angry, they're disenfranchised. Here's a gun. I'll make you feel powerful.
There's a really good fictional book that's in the teen kids section, but it's a pretty thick one. It's called Daniel, I think it's called Daniel the Good Nazi. I just finished reading it, but it shows the progression of a kid who's growing up in Germany, comes from a very wealthy family. His father's an attorney, high up in the German government, and then it shows through the course of Hitler taking over. You know, his best friend is part of the dock workers. Family's lowest on the totem pole, poor, but they both want to join the Hitler Youth when it starts to rise up, and then he finds out his mother, way back in the line somewhere, has Jewish blood, but her family had actually left the Jewish community, but it's still
still there,
and
yeah.
so the struggle they go through, and it shows, you know, him and his friend constantly coming back into contact with each other and having that, holding each other's life in their hands. But at one point he hated his mom, and because he'd just been told it was wrong, and so it was a really great depiction of the struggle that was going on with so many people through that time frame.
It's strange because a lot of people were forced to turn on their neighbors, you know, and a lot of it came down to, well, it's either you or me, and I'd rather it be you. So, I mean, when we're done, we have the Truth and Reconciliation. You guys familiar with those, the Truth and Reconciliation trials? This happens in almost every war-torn country where there's genocide, murder. The Truth and Reconciliation trials really do begin in Germany, and it kind of begins through every other genocide that follows. But the idea is that you kind of have people discuss.
Trials called,
Well, there are the
War Crimes Tribunal.
there are war crimes trials, and then there are the Nuremberg trials.
Right.
But the Truth and Reconciliation trials were just another kind of peace brokering between the communities. Again, propaganda was key to disperse information to the peoples. Very anti-democratic, anti-liberal. You don't need rights because it's not like you're going to break the law. And if you break the law, then you're not a good citizen anyway. So we're going to put you in jail. You don't have the right to say what we're doing is wrong because you don't have any better ideas. And you know what? We're trying to make society better. There's kind of the argument of, you know, what is more important, security or freedoms? And the argument that Hitler's making is freedom is dangerous and security is what is needed at this time. And again, everyone made the same argument. Mussolini said, look what's happened so far with freedom. Has it worked out for us so far? How much is a loaf of bread today? You know, you ask Stalin. Stalin asked, you know, how's our economy doing? You know, freedom's working out for all of us? Obviously not. Let's do it my way now. So we tried things and it didn't work out.
Well, it's the same fear ruling that they do now. You know, I mean, if you think about it, if you put enough stress and fear on people, they'll sign away anything.
Of course.
It's now hell to fly because somebody, you know, bombed our towers with a plane.
It's not a terrible technique. It's a great way to control people. Fear.
Oh, completely.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about World War II. Actually, this is World War II as told by Dr. Seuss. As many people may not know, Dr. Seuss was a prolific World War II cartoonist. There's actually a great book out there called Dr. Seuss Goes to War. And it's a book about just all the cartoons that Dr. Seuss kind of makes. They're horribly racist. I'm putting it out right now. The buck-toothed Japanese guy and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's pretty out there. But again, I mean, one of his jobs, Theodore Geisel, was to get people to kind of support the war effort. Again, remember, one more lollipop and then you all go home. So again, what this is depicting is this idea of, during World War II, Germany was taking a little bit at a time, and rather than telling them no, we said, okay, just one more. Okay, just one more. Okay, just one more. But instead of lollipops, we're talking about countries. Germany takes Belgium first. Okay, well, that last one, Germany, you promise not to do it again? I promise. Okay, fine. It takes Austria. Okay, no more, Germany. Okay, fine, we promise. No more. It takes Czechoslovakia. Germany, we said no more. Okay, last time, I promise. So then he takes Poland. And they were like, okay, Germany, that's the last time. But again, we appeased them for so long that, you know, we would just assume that things were going to be fine.
Well, could you argue, though, that part of it was we didn't have a full idea of what was going on?
No, we were fully aware of what was going on. I think what it came down to was that we tried to ignore it as best we could. Because World War I, we lost so many people.
Well, the genocide part, like...
Oh, the genocide...
We didn't know the atrocities were to the extent that they were.
But the genocide was not even an issue until near the end of the war. I mean, they weren't really killing people until the very, very end. And so really, and again, to be fair, I mean, regardless of which country you're in, most of these countries at this time were still sort of heavily racist against the Jews. So, I mean, push come to shove, these countries could really care less. I mean, sure, the Jewish lobby to promote America to go to war, but other than that, most of these other countries were not going to war to save the Jews, not by any means.
Well, nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
Where did
Precisely. The diaspora was like, go wherever you want.
And
But
then they would exile them to certain countries, and then they would have to put a cap on it.
Right.
Like, oh, well, if we send them back here, then we're doing this.
Right.
So.
I think the major reason why we were so willing to appease the Germans was because World War I resulted in killing over 16 million people in Europe. We didn't want another war. So if it meant making Germany not attack anyone else, okay, look, Germany, just whatever it takes, just stop. And we hoped that that would be enough. But Germany, of course, said, okay, let's see what else I can take. Let's see what else I can take. And by the time the British and the French said, okay, enough is enough, Germany said, nope, we're going to keep going. One way to get Germany to not fight a two-front war was by signing the Non-Aggression Pact with the Soviet Union. This Non-Aggression Pact signed by the Soviet Union pretty much said, look, here's what we're going to go ahead and do. We're going to go ahead and not fight each other. And we'll divide up Poland and Eastern Europe. And to be fair, this was a temporary treaty, and both knew it because both hated each other. Their governments don't work. They can't work together. They're two completely different ones. Technically, communism is supposed to wipe everything out, and the people are supposed to be in charge. Whereas fascism is the government is in charge. The government controls everything. It's not the government are the people. It's the government tells the people what to do. Communism is the opposite. There is no government because the people are the government. And so the two don't really work hand in hand. And they're two different ethnic groups. The Aryans want to take over everything, and the Slavics don't want to do the exact same thing. So it's not really going to work out. So this is kind of a holding measure. This is what we're going to do at the time. And we signed a pact, and we also signed a pact with Emperor Hirohito of Japan. So these are just one of those things where we sign. We call this a tripartite pact. All the three pacts signed together. That's the tripartite. In any case, so we invade Poland, and France and England declare war, finally. But it actually goes pretty quickly, hence the Blitzkrieg. You know when football players, they call it blitz? It's very lightning quick. It's a blitz. It's lightning fast. So the lightning war begins, and really what it comes down to is that we can't really stop them because Germany was already ready for war. We were not. The French and the British were like, what the hell is going on? And the French, ultimately, they didn't even do anything anyway. They just hung behind the Maginot Line. You guys familiar with the Maginot Line at all? Maginot Line? During World War I, here's Germany, and here's France. Germany and France share a border, a very long border. Not exactly like this, but my drawing is terrible. But they share a border. And what happened was that during World War I, during that Schlieffen Plan we talked about, Germany sent all of its troops along this one front. So in order to prevent the Germans from ever doing this again, the French built something called the Maginot Line. And the Maginot Line was a fortified wall between Germany and France with like guns and cannons and towers just to like oversee to make sure if the Germans ever tried to attack, we would see it, we'd be able to repel it, we would conquer it, we would shoot at them. I mean, just turrets across the border. The goal was to make sure that the Germans would never cross the Maginot Line again, because they did before. And so the French said, don't worry, even if the Germans come to attack, we're going to defend ourselves because the Maginot Line is impenetrable. And they were right, it was. It was a really hard thing to scale. There were tanks, cannons, whatever else. It was hard to defeat. So the Germans said, okay, fine. You know what? You're right. We can't defeat that. So the Germans went around it. Because the Maginot Line literally was just a line. And then they went north through Belgium and down, and the Maginot Line was completely useless. But that's the Maginot Line. They hid behind it. The cartoon here is we could have, we would have, we should have, is that we probably should have stopped Germany. We would have stopped Germany. We should have stopped Germany, but by this time it was already too late. We should have gone to war. We could have gone to war. We would have gone to war, but we didn't.
So if we had stopped them sooner, or gotten involved sooner instead of the one more lollipop type thing, it would have stopped them.
Yeah.
Because then they would have had all the other
Yeah.
conquered countries.
I mean, by conquering the countries, we doubled their resources. They added to their army, created military prowess. It gave them experience. It made them, prideful. I mean, they gained land hunger as a result of that. And so we were foolish. We should have stopped them from the very beginning, but we didn't. And so Germany says, okay, fine. I don't have to go to war with Russia on my Eastern Front because I just signed a pact. So the only country I have to destroy are the French. So they pour through Belgium like it's nothing. The French have no choice but to retreat to Dunkirk. This is known as the miracle at Dunkirk, because 300,000 troops, pretty much the majority of the French army, was about to be destroyed by the British. I mean, they were literally pushed all the way back to the English Channel. And the only way the majority of the French army... Huh?
The British or the Nazis?
Who?
You just said they were pushed back by the British.
Oh, I'm sorry. The British and the French soldiers were pushed back by the Nazis all the way to the English Channel, to the point where they almost were completely defeated, and they all would have been held prisoner. Luckily, at the miracle at Dunkirk, what happened was that all these fishing boats and all these private boats from England sailed all the way down to Dunkirk, and they saved hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Because if not, that would be the bulk of the European fighting force against the Germans. But we saved them. Now, many of them were still captured. But the reality is, if it wasn't for the miracle at Dunkirk, we would have lost that war. We wouldn't have anyone to stop the Germans from that point on. Unfortunately, France is overthrown, and you start seeing the emergence of Vichy France. So Vichy France is called Vichy France because it's based in Vichy, France. But the Vichy France is German-controlled France, or it's Nazi France, is a term that's used. It's puppet France, or Vichy France. Charles de Gaulle, who will be the guy, General Charles de Gaulle, will continue to lead Free France from England. And then the rebels will then fight from within. But Free France and Vichy France are two completely different things.
So is this why people are still in France?
No. People are not so okay with France because, well, their attitude towards Americans, I guess. They're holier than thou, we're better than everyone. But I think also there's a joke that, again, the French fell twice to the Germans very quickly. So, instead of fighting, they just laid down and gave up.
Right.
And so we might as well go ahead and start invading Africa as well. So Mussolini, while Germany's focusing on Europe, decides to invade Africa to expand the Italian Empire.
I'm so confused. So three.
All hell's breaking loose. That's what you need to know.
Who are the three to get, it's Germany, Russia, and who else?
Italy.
Italy. Okay.
Yeah, so Germany, actually it's Germany, Japan,
Oh yeah, they're going on.
and Italy.
Right now we're
Where's
just
the
covering.
Soviet Union?
That's Russia.
They signed a treaty, and they're not in the war. So they signed,
Russia was part of the Soviet Union.
Russia is in the Soviet Union,
Right.
but the Soviet Union is not fighting in this war.
So they're just chilling back?
Yeah, because they're not ready. They signed a treaty, and they said, hey, you know what? Germany, go ahead. We'll split Poland, and we won't go to war with each other at all. So this is Stalin's way of avoiding war, and this Hitler's way of saying, oh, great, I don't have to worry about the Soviet Union. I can just go ahead and attack France.
So at the beginning it was just Germany and Italy and then Japan, or?
Germany, Italy, and Japan were always part of the tripartite.
Okay.
Those three were always joined together. Okay? The Soviets were kind of just, we're just going to hang out here, develop our military, develop our economy. Germany and us, we're like friends for now, so no big deal. We're not going to go ahead and get involved with anyone. We're just going to mind our own business. Yes. So the tripartite, or the Axis powers are, again, Germany, Japan, and Italy.
Okay, so
They're the Axis powers.
So while Germany is setting their sights on everything between them, Japan, and Italy,
Mhm.
except stopping at the northern border of the Soviet Union, Italy's going south into Africa.
Yes.
And Japan's going west.
Asia. They're focusing on Asia.
Okay, then when did they come to Hawaii? Because it kind of seems like Japan.
Well, Hawaii, The reason why they attack Hawaii is because of their concern for America. America controls the Philippines at this time.
Right.
We own the Philippines at this time.
Oh,
so
so they were actually going after.
Well, no. What happened? Well, no, what happened was, again, this is where all the background kind of comes in. The
Right.
problem was that America controlled the Philippines,
Right.
and what Japan wanted to do was to control all of Asia, and they eventually wanted to include the Philippines as well.
Okay.
And so what they realized was that the American naval presence in the Philippines is not very strong. We're slowly trying to give the Filipinos independence by this time anyway. We're about, we're about 10 years away from giving them independence regardless. We already knew this was going to happen. And so American naval presence in the Philippines has kind of dwindled since, because we're slowly giving them autonomy. So the expectation was the only thing that can destroy us right now is the U.S. Navy. And the U.S. Navy is based in Hawaii. And so if we destroy that, that will give us a significant amount of time to be able to conquer the Philippines and everything else in Asia. Because up until this point, the Americans and the Japanese signed something called the Root-Takahira Agreement in 1907 that said that we would recognize each other's empires and things would be great and we would share. But the Japanese realized that the Americans were not going to be content with just the Philippines, that they might try to expand their influence, and the Japanese said, we don't want to share. We want to conquer Asia. We want it to be ours. So the Japanese decide we're just going to conquer everything, and the only one really standing in our way is America.
Right.
So we're going to divide up the world. Japan got Asia, Germany got Europe, and Italy would get southern Eastern Europe and Africa. And that's how the world was going to be divided. The Soviet Union was going to be in the middle, and eventually the expectation was all three would then invade the Soviet Union. But that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. Not anytime, anyway. So, again, they try to attack Africa.
Which is colonized by Britain.
Yes, which is controlled by Britain predominantly, and France. France really can't do anything because, again, their government has already been toppled. So the British try to push back, and then Rommel is sent in. He's the Desert Fox to kind of fight against the British. So, again, you had this massive fighting, and again, this is why it's another world war. You're literally fighting across the world here. Pretty impressive stuff. And again, the entire time, the Soviet Union just sitting back, developing its economy, building its military. Because, by the way, Stalin wasn't stupid. He knew the second that the French and the British were taken care of, that Hitler was going to attack them, because they didn't get along. It was just it was a truce for the moment. You know, it allowed them to focus. And
My enemy is my friend.
exactly,
For a while.
exactly.
How all did these guys get along?
Mussolini and Hitler, pretty much Hitler first saw Mussolini as like, I respect your ideas are great. But then Hitler realized that Mussolini was not a very strong person, great orator, but very unorganized, not very strong. So Hitler said, let me handle things. And Mussolini ends up taking a back seat because the reality is Hitler had a much more powerful military. So what it came down to was that Mussolini, even though he was the founder of fascism, ends up taking a backseat to Hitler. And, you'd think he'd be upset about that, but he's like, nah, whatever. Like, I really don't have the power to be able to take over all this stuff anyway, so I'll roll with it. Yeah.
So was Stalin just sitting there waiting for? Because he knew that Hitler was land hungry.
Sure.
So did he just wait till he had spread too thin? Type thing? Or-
No, again, you have to understand that the economy of the Soviet Union is not strong yet. The military is not strong yet. So he's building up his economy. He's not necessarily waiting for Hitler to spread himself thin. He's just waiting
or
to
that's
see what
the
happens.
purpose of waiting.
Exactly.
Like he knows if he waits, to build up his stuff, he knows while he's doing that, Hitler will spread himself.
Exactly. So, it's just a benefit. It's a side effect of what Hitler's doing. But really, what Stalin did was bide himself time.
Okay.
And Hitler also wanted that pact. He wanted the pact so he could focus on something else. Exactly. In any case, you had the awesome Battle of Britain, Operation Sea Lion, where we do defend ourselves against the British. And the 57-day London Blitz is actually pretty impressive. They bombed the city for 57 days straight.
Wait, we defend ourselves against?
Yeah. The Royal Air Force versus the German Luftwaffe. The Germans attack. I'm assuming that I'm British.
Okay. I was like, wait, what?
My apologies.
I was like,
I always just personify whoever's the good guy at the time, or the bad guy. depending on who I'm talking about. But the British defend themselves against the German Luftwaffe over a 57-day London Blitz. It's actually pretty impressive what they're able to do. And again, this is where you kind of see those people entering the bomb shelters underneath. By the way, even today, the secret bomb shelters still exist. There is, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, a 33-mile underground a set of tunnels and bunkers that are still stocked fully with food, supplies in Britain. They're all closed down now, but if you enter the London subway tunnels, they're still there. And they're still fully stocked with radios, supplies, rations.
Can you go see them if you go to London?
I don't think you're allowed to technically, but I remember that. I mean, there are people that go like cave diving and they go like urban, whatever you call it, urban finding stuff thing, adventuring.
Geocaching.
Maybe, I don't know what it's called, but maybe that may be it. I really don't know. But yeah, I mean, they reported how they found these old tunnels that are still completely intact. They're still maintained. I mean, it's not just like we forgot about them. We're still maintaining them in the event that maybe the Soviets attack with a nuclear weapon, whatever else. It's pretty interesting stuff that even today these tunnels are still active. I mean, those are the same tunnels that they wanted to use to blow up Parliament and V for Vendetta. I mean, it's the same, pretty much the same tunnels. In any case, one of the major reasons why we were able to defend ourselves is development of radar, which actually does kind of let us know when they're coming.
Concern though, like obviously V for Vendetta is fictional, but the uprising, you know, if things go horribly.
Sure,
wrong,
which is why, again, the tunnels are shut down, the tunnels are closed, you're not allowed down there, blah, blah, blah. I mean, many of these tunnels are just like literally just like barricaded with just like concrete, whatever else. But the other tunnels are still working. I mean, they are still operational. Anyway, they don't defeat Britain, even though there was an expectation that we would. But they do demolish the British Air Force for some time. King's Speech does a really great job portraying this time period. If you guys ever get a chance to watch the movie King's Speech, fantastic job portraying this. And so, here are the Germans, ho-hum, when he's finished pecking down that last tree, he'll quite likely be tired. Pretty much, again, as the Germans are destroying France, Poland, Norway, Greece, Yugoslavia, Holland, he's chopping down England. America is still kind of sitting pretty doing nothing.
I love that these all say Dr. Seuss.
Yep.
It's so wrong to me.
You have to remember, the entire time, America has declared neutrality. America is not getting involved at all. We're neutral during this time period.
So is the Lorax the story of World War II with a nice child?
No, the Lorax is about environmental degradation. That's what Lorax is about. If you want to talk about a book about Cold War, the Butter Battle book is about the Cold War. But in any case, yeah, so again, America at this time is remaining neutral. They don't want to get involved. Now, FDR, who's president at the time, very much wants to go to war, but he can't convince his people yet. So he's just hoping and praying we'll go to war. But it's not December 7th yet, but it is 1941. And we're just waiting and biding our time, wondering when will be it. But up by this time, guys, we're already lending and leasing weapons to the Allies. It's called Lend-Lease. Lend-Lease was the program of selling and giving weapons to our allies. So that already began by this time. We've successfully defeated the French, or the Germans successfully defeated the French. The Germans did a pretty good job destroying the British. So now Operation Barbarossa begins. Operation Barbarossa. Anyone know who Barbarossa is, by the way? He was the Holy Roman Emperor from way, way, way back when. That's why they called it Barbarossa. Germany decides, you know what? We need Russia. Not as a friend. We need what they have. And so what they begin is an invasion of Russia. They break the Nazi-Soviet pact. And they begin a massive invasion. Pretty much what the Russians did to make sure that the Germans could not survive was they slashed and burned. They destroyed and burned everything in their wake. So if there was food where they were camped out, they would burn and destroy all the food. If there was any resources, they would burn and destroy all the resources so the Germans can have nothing. They left them nothing, not a crumb. Everything was destroyed or taken because they weren't going to leave the Germans anything.
It's funny to see how things repeat. It kind of reminds me of Sherman's March.
Yep.
Where
Yeah.
they did the same.
Shermanizing.
All the, yeah. So it's funny to see. Well, I mean, even when we were talking about the wall in
Mhm.
France, it's kind of like in Mesopotamia.
Yeah, and actually the same thing here. I mean, Napoleon did the exact same thing when Napoleon tried to invade France. And ultimately what happened is that Operation Barbarossa fails because of the Russian winter. Just like Napoleon was defeated by the Russian winter. It all fails because they can't stand the cold. and they're defeated. Enemy at the Gates is a fantastic movie about, again, how they held Leningrad is between two snipers, a Russian and a German sniper. Enemy at the Gates is a really good movie about holding. But again, the interesting thing is that this did kill a lot of Russians, though. It got to the point where here's a Russian fighting, and when he dies, the next Russian has to run up and grab his gun because there weren't enough guns. So this is what the Russians were fighting with. It was a surprise attack by the Germans, and so we had to fight back, and as we retreated, we burned everything that we could.
But why did Germany do it in winter?
It wasn't just in winter, but it lasted for so long.
That it went. Okay.
It went through the winter.
But at some point, don't you, as the commander, have to sit back and go, all right, it looks like we're going to rush into winter. We need to get supplies
But again,
out there to prepare them.
Sure, unless you are confident in the prowess of the German military, maybe overconfident in the prowess of the German military, and believe that my guys are solid. Don't worry. Cold, please. We can handle that. And that's really what it came down to. Said, you go or you die. And so they died. Then what ends up happening is the Day of Infamy. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Ultimately, what it came down to was that the U.S. began banning sales to Japan, weapons, supplies, whatever else, because we clearly knew what was coming. We knew this war was going to happen. We just didn't know when. We were biding our time hoping that we didn't have to. But the U.S. also needed this war to happen, primarily because Japan was controlling most of the trees in Asia that created rubber. I don't know if you guys know this, but we had a huge rubber shortage at this time, which was kind of a major problem. We didn't have enough rubber because the Japanese controlled all the rubber trees. Or at least they took over all the countries in Asia that were producing rubber at the time.
Isn't that how we changed to the track system on some of our military gear? I thought that was what...
It's something like that. And I was just going to mention it, and it kind of dropped. Yeah, it fell out of my brain. But yeah, something like that, about how we decided that there was going to be a more effective way. We replaced rubber with, again, something. I can't remember what it is anymore. But Americans had to be able to be inventive because we just don't have rubber as a resource. So something happens. I don't know what it is. I can't even think. I want to say nylon, but that's not right. Anyway, and then of course we have to intern the Japanese in Executive Order 9066, which we'll talk about during U.S. history. But Executive Order 9066 goes ahead and puts all Japanese into internment camps. Sorry, Japanese, but you look like enemy combatants.
But wasn't it a lot of just Asians in general got put in because?
If you were mistaken, sure, you can prove your identity pretty easily. But the Japanese, even if you were Nisei and if you weren't first generation, if you're even like 10th generation, they would still put you in there. You were still put in just in case. But also many people forget that it wasn't just Japanese put in there. Many people were just like political protesters, say, this is wrong, that there were whites, blacks, Italians, families that were multiracial.
That's often overlooked in the history.
What?
The Japanese internment camps.
Oh, big time.
So, do they have any sites where these were?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
San Francisco's full of them.
Manzanar. You can go visit it right now. Manzanar is all right because you're not from here. Okay, so I think that's fair. So a few things. There are actually many places you can go. The Japanese American National Museum, which is in the heart of LA. You just take the Metrolink all the way down to So the Japanese American National Museum is right there, and they actually have a really fantastic exhibit on just the Japanese internment camp. But Manzanar is still around. You can still visit that. They actually do a yearly pilgrimage where you can actually walk to Manzanar. I forget from what point, but there's a yearly pilgrimage to Manzanar. At the same time, Santa Anita Racetrack, which is not too far from here as well, off the 210, that was a staging ground where they would collect all the Japanese, and then they would ship them off to Hart Mountain, Manzanar, all those places. So actually, it's still pretty prominent, especially if you teach in Southern California, any of the western states. It's heavily in our state standards just because it was so prominent on our end of the coasts. But no, there are still places you can still visit.
It used to be though, because I don't remember learning about it until it was rough.
They don't? Because I teach the crap. Maybe I'm Asian American, but I teach a crap load of it in
When
my
I was
class.
in school, we got a glimpse of it in 8th grade, and it was only because I had a really great 8th grade English teacher. But
Yeah,
we
because they're
never
not supposed to be
went
teaching in
back.
8th grade, yeah.
Yeah, but in high school, I don't ever remember, and I was in honors. But
You should have, because it's in the state standards.
No,
You
I
should.
I do remember. I just know that I remember, but I know that it's overlooked.
Yeah, and then clearly that's the case, because I know I received a lot of, but I mean the community I grew up in was predominantly Asian, so maybe there was local pressures to do so. In my course, I do teach a lot of it just because Executive Order 9066 is a pretty big deal, and again, I always teach it as if it happened then, it can happen today. I say like, oh, it can never happen. Well, imagine if some Mexican terrorist decided to bomb Los Angeles. Who would they not take?
Arabs after 9/11. I mean,
That would be horrible.
Yeah.
That's
But-
uncalled for. Let's
but-
not do that.
But I mean, it was one of those things where it's the same thing. Is that
It
like,
is.
yeah, and so then they would in turn and they say, oh, it would never happen, but they did rule that it was legal for a time, and then ex parte endo said, okay, maybe not, but there was a time where Supreme Court ruled, no, during wartime, this is legit. You can do this. Supreme Court ruled on it,
right.
and then eventually they're like, okay, maybe not. Okay, maybe we're wrong, but they did leave an opening of during wartime, there are extraneous circumstances in which, some of your rights are not there. And yeah, it sucks. But again, yeah, it's definitely something that's overlooked, but at least in my experience with teachers I work with, they don't. Maybe could I just work with exceptional teachers? But I imagine that you guys should definitely work on this. Anything that deals with issues of rights discrimination, you definitely should highlight it.
Yeah.
Just-
I
just-
know. I was
just-
just saying there was huge gaps. Like,
Yes.
it really was a very, I hate to say this, but Americanized.
Of course.
And it almost reminded me of, the ancient civilizations, like especially Egypt. When something happened, that huge pillar just kind of went missing.
Of course.
And so you get, best book I've read is Everything in History My 8th Grade Teacher Never Taught Me, or something like that.
Lies my teacher told me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that book.
Yeah.
Such a great depiction. Well, in college when I took American military history, we had to read as one of our textbooks stories the soldiers wouldn't tell about the Civil War, and it's about how hookers were used. And it's funny because looking back at it, the Civil War was such a nice, clean, pretty little war. I mean, like, it's war, and we have this cute little Americanized, put a bow on it, and it's all pretty. And then
No, it's pretty rough.
Well, no, it was,
Yeah.
but it's not depicted that way.
Not after.
A lot of times.
The reason why is because of the Gilded Age and how during Reconstruction we wanted to cure the tensions of the war, or like the post-war era. We want to unify the country, so we romanticize the war
But
as
you
more
have
like.
to learn about it. I mean, I don't remember vividly learning about the hooker towns and using hookers as spies and the syphilis that ran rampant through the troops.
Yeah.
And those are things that
I
would
think
remember.
so. I think what it comes down to then is this: is that, and you guys will experience this as you guys become teachers, is that your textbook won't talk about any of that stuff. It's a responsibility of the teacher again.
Right.
Yes, and so don't be the teacher that just teaches what's in the book. I mean, obviously, don't be that teacher. You can't. It just doesn't do justice to what these kids learn. What you have to do is you have to do your own research. I mean, you have to know so much more than what the kids know, because they will ask, and the kids are always going to ask, why does this matter? And it's going to be your responsibility to create everyday analogies for them. One of the biggest ways why my classroom, I would argue, is so successful, because on any given day, if my kids ask, why is this important to me, I can make a parallel comparison to their daily lives. Why should World War I matter? Well, let me explain. If you went to war, if this happened, here's what would happen to you. The reason why war is fought today because of this. And so I think that you have to learn beyond the book, because the book, again, it's not even a college textbook. It's a basic, cursory knowledge. You guys have to supplement. The PowerPoints do a great job of that, whatever you guys want to do with it whatsoever. But you have to read. You really have to read. The textbook hours, and is always fun. But you know what? And Wikipedia is not terrible. Like, in all honesty. It's not a bad resource now.
A lot better than it used to be.
Yeah, I think that if you guys can teach regular, go pick up an AP textbook. That's going to always work out a lot better, because you'll know significantly more. And again, whenever you get a chance, always look at the history bestsellers that are always being written. I mean, they're fantastic. And yeah, if you guys ever have a question as you guys go into your teaching profession and you guys want some direction as to where you guys want to go with the subject, always let me know. I can always guide you guys in the right direction. In any case, America, like I said, was isolationist We wanted to not get involved, and then war happened. We were shocked by the attack by the Japanese. Well, at least the American people were shocked. We kind of knew what was going to happen. People always wonder, did FDR just willingly allow them to attack us? No, there was no conspiracy to let them attack us. It was a surprise. We knew there was an attack. We knew attack was going to happen. We didn't know where. We didn't know when. So it was a shock when Pearl Harbor did occur. So America's blown out of isolationism, and clearly we're pretty upset. There is a fear that the Japanese now are going to be terrorists. They're going to start bombing everything. And so here you see, this is again, Dr. Seuss portraying Japanese Americans, saying that all of these people are now looking for bombs, collecting them, and they're going to be sabotaging American military, sabotaging American homes.
It's left out of Dr. Seuss Day at school.
Of course it does. Not in my class. So the Allies go on the offensive. They say, you know what, screw it, gloves are off, it's time to go to war. And we no longer use the gentleman's combat because they attacked us first. They attacked us in Manila, they attacked us in Pearl Harbor, so we decided to go to war.
Is this satirical or is this actual like sentiments?
No, this is just like straight up just what he put in newspapers.
So what he thinks, like,
Yeah,
wow.
this is okay. Contextually, this was appropriate at the time.
Well, look at Disney.
Yeah, Disney was super racist too. Disney was totally
Oh,
racist.
Horribly.
But again, it's contextually it's like, yeah, totally people, this is what people believed at the time. We're not PC yet. PC doesn't come until much, much later.
Yeah.
And then, so again, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Italy is defeated pretty quickly. Italy is not a strong power. So Italy is defeated. And then Germany kind of has to take over for the Italian front because it's not standing up any longer. So don't worry about that so much.
So who surrendered and overthrew Mussolini?
Oh, the Italians surrendered pretty quickly. And so the Germans are the ones left fighting. Because you have to remember, Italy was not a very strong country to begin with, which is why we had them go fight in Africa instead of the Europeans. Because they just couldn't. They just did not have the prowess to do so.
Honestly, Hitler kind of served him up.
Yeah.
Like, hey, go deal with the British in Africa.
But I mean, it was just like what he did with Russia.
Right.
You have the East, you take the South, I'll take the North and the West. And again, eventually he was going to take over the entire world. I mean, that was his expectation.
Right.
And so now here's the problem. Germany is now trapped between the two. Germany is now forced to fight the Russians and the African front because the Americans, they're starting to invade from Africa. By the way, you guys always look at Italy, it looks like that boot or whatever. But the Americans decided that when we were going to begin the attack on Europe, it was going to begin through Africa and then north through Italy. That's known as Operation Torch because Italy looks like a torch. So Operation Torch was the beginnings of the invasion of Europe.
Torch.
You look at it, it looks like a torch.
Boots. Yeah.
No, but if you, okay, the beginning, the bottom part, but the whole of Italy looks like a torch that goes up and it kind of blossoms out.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? It's
I
there.
like
Go
boots.
look at a map one day. But Operation Torch.
Looking at maps.
Operation Torch is ultimately what becomes how we start entering the foray into World War II. But again, this is not the majority of the American war machine yet. The American war machine will eventually end in 1944 on Normandy, as many of you guys
The
know.
US comes through Africa.
Through Africa into Italy to open up the southern front. The Russians start being hardcore, and the Russians open up the western front, or the eastern front rather, at the Battle of Stalingrad. The Nazis are able to surround the city, and this is where things get pretty real. You have street fighting going on. Yeah, it's pretty nuts.
This is in the Soviet.
This is the Soviet Union.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff happening during World War II. It's not.
How many animations that's happened in this country that's
It really is just a lot going on because it is a world war. I mean, at this time, there's stuff going on. You have the Battle of Coral Sea happening, Battle of Midway. You have island hopping occurring. So again, the global war, America's fighting on two fronts. The Germans are fighting on three fronts. France is still divided in two. The British are still developing their air force again, but they have people on the field. Italy has been completely dismantled.
Sucks that you can't get like primary sources, references anymore.
What do you mean?
People are getting older. Just,
Oh, I see.
Oh,
Well, a lot of it is recorded. So Library of Congress did a fantastic job recording these. Oh yeah, the Library of Congress did a fantastic job.
has a website dedicated through USC. I'll get you the website, but it's dedicated to they're trying to do all acts of genocide, but right now they're focusing on the Holocaust and gathering things like that. But they're trying to span off into the African genocides that are going on too. But it's a really good one. But the local library in Ontario just had a Hungarian Holocaust survivor speak. It was pretty profound. Yeah.
And the cool thing is that while the Library of Congress is trying to collect a lot of oral history, there are tons of oral history projects. So look, I mean, push come to shove, if you ever need primary sources like dialogue, just look at Oral History Project, World War II on Google, and you'll guarantee you'll find stuff. Because actually, the same concern that you had, people began to have as we got through the Cold War, wondering, wait a minute, are these people going to die and we'll never get their stories? And so the Oral History Project actually did a pretty good job. And so I would highly encourage your students, if you ever get a chance, to do an oral history project for the Vietnam War or the Korean War. Because you will still have some vets that still fought in those wars. And you can do some oral history projects in your history classes, which are phenomenal. And if you have immigrant groups, the oral history project for just the immigrant experience is also a phenomenal story.
So what do? Do they look for people to count their? Okay.
So what you might want is maybe depending on how old your school is, you maybe contact alumni and ask them to come on, have them do oral history projects with maybe friends or family. But an oral history project is good, and there are actually free oral history online seminars that'll show you how to do one. They'll help you develop your questions. I think it's through the I keep on getting emails from them all the time.
University of Phoenix?
No. It's someplace in Texas that will do free online training every April and February. Yeah, it's just online, and then they'll just show you how to develop an oral history project. And it's for oral historians, but you can then cater it to your students. And again, I'll give you guys the samples that I used when I did it with my kids, but my school's turning 100 in 2 years. And so we're collecting. Yeah, I have to do it because I'm in charge of the oral history of the school, and so
the stories of
alums. Yeah, and so my students right now are developing just questionnaires of just what do we want to know about the school, and again, part of it comes down to just tell me about what you remember, and that'll just ask follow-up questions. But it's actually pretty fun. And then so if you do the immigrant experience oral history project, just did your family immigrate here? No. Well, then tell me about your grandparents.
Or find someone.
Exactly, or find someone.
Which is a good way to tie your students back into the community.
Yeah, that's always fantastic.
Yeah. Also use museums. You'd be amazed at some of the sources they'd be willing to work with you. I know at the elementary school, the San Bernardino Museum will actually bring in some of their artifacts to show them science because science is missing and because history is lacking too. Museum of Tolerance, phenomenal. They can at least put you in the right direction as to where you would locate some of this stuff.
Right. So, when you guys find your teaching placements, let me know, because there are a lot of museums and libraries that I used to work with for hours. And so, if I know that they're already actively working with high schools, then I'll put you guys in the right direction and where you guys get placed. In any case, the Battle of Stalingrad is pretty awesome, but the Germans decide to retreat because ultimately what it comes down to, there were just more Russians there. It was their home turf, and there were just more of them. So it was a battle of attrition, and the Russians won it. So now the Russians start chasing them all the way. And again, here's a snowball effect of the Russians. I would like to take this opportunity to prophesize a white Christmas, because again, the Russian winters have destroyed the Germans. And so you have the magic of D-Day, June 6, 1944. Oh, sure. I think how far are we on this?
It's 7.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a quick break. Let's do that. Take a.
Should go back into their up and outside.
I don't. No, there should just go down.
Sweet.
Down to the right. Let's take a 10. All right, so the paratroopers finally arrived. D-Day is pretty much an amazing invasion of Europe, the largest amphibious assault in man's history on the shores of France. It's pretty amazing, and many movies kind of portray this in a pretty amazing way. So if you want to talk about a great battle scene, Saving Private Ryan does a fairly good job of this scene. It's a fairly good scene dramatically, and it is pretty rough because the Germans knew that at some point the Americans and the British were going to assault the beaches, and so they already fortified the entire beach. Like all the beaches of France were fortified.
So this is Germany invading France?
No, this is America invading Europe through France.
Oh, okay, France for the Allies.
Yes, but the goal is that, remember, France at this time is controlled by the Germans.
Uh-huh.
So the idea is we're going to land on French soil, drive out the Germans, liberate France, and then
Help
with
us.
with our French allies, then go from there. So that's the basic idea of the invasion of D-Day. Then the war in the Pacific goes on as well. The Bataan Death March is something you guys should know. The Bataan Death March is when the Japanese force-marched prisoners of war for over 60 miles. Many of them died, tortured. When we talk about brutalities of war, the Japanese were the worst. They just were hands down the worst. They would tear out fingernails, they would tear out eyes, they would cut off people's heads, cut off tongues. Whenever they brought in a group of new prisoners, they'd kill one right away, just to show what they meant business. And they tortured them. I mean, they literally just tortured them. Whereas the Germans killed them all at the end. I mean, they didn't torture most of them, they just killed them. The Japanese tortured the prisoners of war. A lot of it came down to this notion that the Japanese felt superior, and so they felt that everyone else was below them. So they actually felt like, it's okay to do this, because we're Japanese and you're not. Yeah, they're pretty rough, and the Bataan Death March was a pretty horrible
Are they
time.
very still, I guess not patriotic, but xenophobic?
The Japanese not so much anymore. I think that the Japanese had to do a lot of apologizing after World War II, but they actually have this sense that they want to help as many people as they can. I mean, they're one of they participate in the UN a lot. They send in their troops whenever they can. They don't have an army. They have a self-defense force, though. So they do participate in the United Nations every so often, just because they feel like they have a lot to make up for. If anything, xenophobia ended in 1894 when we opened their doors. When we sent in the Great White Fleet, we said, hey, by the way, we have a military. So if you want to be just as strong as the rest of us, you need to have a strong military too. And so Japan kind of ended xenophobia around the 1900s. Yeah. Anyway, the Battle of Midway Island is also a pretty key battle. Midway Island pretty much is just the halfway point of the Pacific Theater. Pretty much this is the turning point. It's pretty well named as well. But once the United States were able to defeat the Japanese, the Battle of Midway, they began island hopping all the way over to the Japanese islands.
You went to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you were there, one thing I noticed, once they tried to open, and this is on the Vietnam spectrum, open tourism and get Americans to come and...
After World War II?
Yeah.
Okay.
We did the prison in Hanoi,
Mhm.
and there were pictures of American troops from the Vietnam War, but instead of the depiction of what was really going on in the prison system and stuff, they made sure it was almost staged, kind of.
Right.
Like there were American prisoners smiling and playing cards, and it was like, guessing that didn't happen every day, kind of thing. And they tried to make it look more appealing. Is the same been happening in Japan? I mean, is there a spin on how things are?
Not really. I think that there's a difference between countries that win against America and countries that, no, but it's true.
Right.
Countries that beat America in wars, they do significantly worse than countries that lose to America in wars. If you lose to America, America will rebuild you. If you beat America, they will have nothing to do with you. So that's what happened to Vietnam. And so Vietnam, they lied about their history and they were unwilling. The Americans rebuilt Japan,
Right.
which means a lot of it was honest. A lot of it came down to the treatment. But admit, America also bombed the crap out of Japan, so you
Right,
also have
right.
that flip side. I mean, the shrines and the museums at Hiroshima and Nagasaki are very true to what happened during those bombings as well. So,
Right. Well, and we went to the British War. Well, now it's called the War Crimes. It used to be
Mhm.
the British and American War Crimes.
Right.
And there were very true parts about the Agent Orange and things
Sure.
that are still happening. However, it seemed very one-sided. Like these were their crimes. We didn't do anything.
Right,
They
and
did a
you
lot,
don't-
And
you don't get that from the German and Japanese museums just because they've been willing to embrace their history. The Vietnamese not so much because they won that war.
okay.
And so they have the ability to be very nationalistic.
Okay.
Whereas that was not the case during the reconstruction of
Well,
Japan
and
and
part of me
Germany.
wondered how much of the current government still has to
True.
do, because they're still very socialistically controlled.
Yeah. Anyway, island hopping. Island hopping is a strategy used. It's in the name. They pretty much went and they defeated the Japanese from island to island to island, because they didn't want to attack all at the same time. So it's one at a time.
People are racist cats.
Yeah, they're all pretty racist. Eventually, the Germans are crushed, as you can see, by three fronts. The Americans coming in from the south, and then the west, and the Russians from the east. And so there you see them eventually converging to Berlin. America was pretty upset because the Russians got to Berlin first. And we were not happy about that because we wanted to get to Berlin first, but they did. One of the major reasons why Hitler committed suicide was because the Russians got there first. If America got there first, it's unlikely that Hitler would have committed suicide because we probably would have not tortured him. The Russians would have. The Russians were pissed off at Hitler, especially because of the invasion. America would not have would have been fairer, I guess, if you can say.
So Iraq was our ally in that?
Yeah. Iraq was a mandate of England, controlled at the time, not independent yet. All these countries become independent after 1946. No one is afraid of the big bad wolf, so finally, December 1944, it's the last attempt by the Germans to fight back. You have the Allies bombing Dresden. You guys are familiar with the firebombing of Dresden? The one book by Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse 5. It's about the bombing of Dresden and how he's a soldier in that war, and many actually Allied soldiers were in Dresden, prisoners of war at the time, were there, and we firebombed it. In fact, the firebombing of Dresden was more powerful than the dropping of the bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We firebombed the crap out of it. We killed more people in Dresden than we did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, not combined, just individually. The Battle of Dresden?
No, which book? The book
Slaughterhouse 5. Now, Slaughterhouse 5 is Kurt Vonnegut, so it's weird, in that, so he's a soldier, he's in the bombing of Dresden, and then aliens show up. So things kind of get weird, but it's still a good book.
To chapter 10, just stop.
Yeah, just kind of just skip around a bit. Hitler commits suicide, and then VE Day happens May 8th, Victory in Europe Day is the end of the war. In the Pacific, we're not done with the Japanese yet. Excuse me. And again, much to the chagrin of the Americans, the Russians flew their flag first. We really wanted to get to Berlin first because we knew that once we got there, once the Russians got there, it was going to be really hard to get them out.
The big bad wolf being the Americans?
The Germans. The Germans. Again, when we began the D-Day or the offensive front on Normandy, we hoped that we would get to Germany before the Russians, and when we didn't, we were so upset because we knew that Russia was now not going to leave, and hence the Cold War happened. The Pacific, Iwo Jima and Okinawa are the two key battles that you guys should know. What we learned at the Battle of Iwo Jima and Okinawa was that the Japanese were going to fight to the death. They were ruthless. This is where you see the beginning of kamikazes. You know what the term kamikaze means in Japanese?
They kill themselves.
Yeah, but the term kamikaze is also a drink. It means divine wind. You know, like they were blessed by their ancestors, and the divine wind was going to strike at their enemies. And so the divine wind, or the kamikazes, were Japanese that were willing to kill themselves in order to sink ships. Not very effective, though. Many people think that the kamikazes were effective, but they weren't. Many of them were shot down. Some of them did sink ships, but very, very few actually were that effective. The one funny story is that a kamikaze plane actually missed a ship, but then blew up underneath it, which still sunk the ship. So it's the only time a kamikaze plane missed a ship and still sunk it, because it was by accident. We realized that in Iwo Jima and Okinawa, these were islands right outside the mainland of Japan, that they were going to fight to the death. I mean, this is the one where you see them. We have to use flamethrowers because they're like in holes and they refuse to leave and they're shooting outside the holes. So America brings in flamethrowers to get the Japanese out. I mean, we just try to kill as many as we can, and they will not surrender. They're so proud. And so what we realize is that if we invade Japan, the fighting is going to keep going. Like, we're going to lose so many American lives. So in the effort to try to save American lives, Truman decides the only way to end this war quickly is to drop an atomic bomb. And so in the meeting at Potsdam is one of the meetings that we have. At the Potsdam Conference, we issue Japan an ultimatum: surrender or face destruction. No one knows that America has the atomic bomb besides the Americans and the British. No one else knows that this weapon exists. Japan doesn't know. We didn't even tell Russia, which is why they're all pissed off at us. They said, we're allies, why didn't you tell us? Because we didn't want you to have this technology. So we warned Japan. Surrender or face destruction. Well, we get close. They refuse to surrender. We're right outside the mainland of Japan. As you can see, Okinawa and Iwo Jima are not too far from mainland Japan, and they refuse to surrender. So we say, okay, fine. And we drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. We kill 70,000 people instantly.
Did anyone else at this time have access to the
Atomic weapons?
nuclear weapons?
Nope, just the United States. Russia doesn't develop a nuclear weapon until 1949. So,
No, everyone does.
what?
No, it seems that everyone does.
Actually, in the world today, only 9 countries possess nuclear weapons.
It's a lot compared to one.
It's way more. And so actually, I actively work in nuclear nonproliferation. I have, I work with nuclear weapons pretty frequently. 9 countries currently possess nuclear weapons. We're at about 17,000 right now, which is much less than 60,000 in the heyday of the 1960s. So we've gotten rid of a lot. But no, it's one country having some is way too much. Yeah. Remember, we're the only country ever to use nuclear weapons in war. We're the only country, and we did it twice. We're the only country ever to use nuclear weapons in war, and now we're like, never again, because we learned that it was not a good idea. By the way, we didn't know if this weapon was going to work, so we did also attempt to create something called a tsunami bomb. A tsunami bomb was not a nuclear weapon, but we were going to drop, I think, 340 megatons of dynamite in a straight line right outside Japan, and we're going to detonate them and create a tsunami. That was the other suggestion. Luckily, the atom bomb worked. We say luckily because 70,000 people died, but the tsunami would have also been pretty devastating. So 70,000 people, 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit instantly, 890 mile per hour winds, 62,000 buildings destroyed, 140,000 dead by the end of 1945, many of which died from cancer, radiation poisoning, that kind of thing. I mean, if you're within a mile of that blast, you are going to die of radiation poisoning within a few hours.
So why did Russia declare war on Japan?
Because they were supposed to. They're an ally. Part of the agreement, part of the Yalta Agreement, TYP, Tehran, Yalta, Potsdam, the Yalta Agreement, Russia said once we're done with Germany, we'll go to war with Japan.
Oh.
By the way, America was not happy with that at all either.
Well, at this point, it kind of seems like overkill.
But we're allies.
Right, but we kind of handled it already.
Right, but
It's like that obnoxious friend that, you're kind of you're in the brink of finding peace in a fight, and then they come in and run their mouth, and then all of a sudden chaos.
but Japan didn't surrender after August 6th.
Was there anything
and then-
left? No.
Well, the city, I mean, that city was destroyed, but they didn't surrender. So August 7th goes by. They still haven't surrendered. Actually, Japan is bent on still continuing the war. They don't even believe that this happened. They hear the reports and they're like, yeah, because if I told you back then 70,000 people are dead, they couldn't believe it. Like, no. So reports would go to the heart of Japan, Tokyo, and they'd be like, this is impossible. You're lying. This is propaganda.
Acknowledging nobody up until it blew
Yeah,
up.
and
Literally,
so they
existed, and
refuse to
I don't
surrender.
Understand how they were like, that didn't happen.
Yeah. In any case, America does not want Russia to go to war in Japan. Because again, the same issue with Germany. Once Russia gets in there, we can't get them out. And so Russia declares war. America says, Japan, do you want to surrender? They're like, no. Okay, fine. So we drop a second atomic weapon because we want to end the war. To be fair, the Japanese were also afraid of the Russians. So it's likely that they also surrendered because they did not want the Russians to invade.
Nagasaki's the second one, right?
Nagasaki's the second. Emperor Hirohito surrenders, and then General MacArthur signs the treaty to end the war on September 2nd on the deck of the Missouri. So, good times. And that's the end of the war. VJ Day. Then the Cold War gets all crazy like. Let's see, which is the easy Cold War one? Let's do this one real quick.
Killed one of my friends.
Let's do quick.
Have you ever been to Cuba?
I have not been to Cuba. If I ever want to have political aspirations in the future, which I still do, I can't go to Cuba anytime soon until we lift any of the embargoes on Cuba. Because if it's on your passport, it's clearly you were there. Can you go to Cuba without being on your passport? Sure, you can. There are ways. I have friends. I've gone to Cuba, that have been able to go through from other countries, but I just haven't had the notion or the immediate willingness to do so anytime soon. Just because I figure that's always something they can use against you. You went to Cuba? You communist? Not exactly.
I just, the story in me loves to go see. Like, I was blown away in Vietnam how we underestimated. Like, yes, they only had bamboo weapons for some of their traps and stuff, but to see the underground tunnel system, like,
Sure, but that's
you can't wrap your brain.
but that's the
around
key word you always say. We underestimated.
Right.
Even American, we underestimated. So like when we write the book, it talks about how awesome we were and how hard it was, but the resilience of the Vietnamese were
It was
brilliant.
astounding, and to see what they were able to. We went in with this mindset of they're farmers and pitchforks, and to see what they were able to create.
They were mankind at its finest, willing to fight. If you want to watch a fantastic documentary in the Vietnam War, Letters Home from Vietnam, Dear America, Letters Home from Vietnam. It's a HBO documentary. Warn your kids, there is some nudity and swearing. Nudity in that, like, there's a man standing and then, like, it's pretty much boys joking around. It's actual video from the war, actual letters from the war that are read by famous actors, but they play music from the time period. Very emotional. Like, the kids will get it very quickly. And what it does is that it portrays what life was really like. It's actual document footage from the war, the letters that kids sent home. It's pretty hard to watch. At the very end, kids are crying.
What was the premise for the invasion again?
Stop the spread of communism.
It was communism.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we're going to get to, is it's all about communism.
France got it over.
Yeah. So part one of all of this is Reconstruction and Confrontation.
But
I
should we
mean,
talk about that one, or is that part of the U.S. history?
the what?
Vietnam. The French involvement in Vietnam.
Well, I mean, that's really U.S. And actually, we could actually skip all of this because we are going to talk about this during the U.S. history portion. But the Vietnamese were a French colony, and then
Right.
they lost.
Which, my question is,
They lost the battle at the Dien Bien Phu, and then so.
right, but after all the crap that France put us through with World War II and how they were technically allies, but not very participatory allies.
But that wasn't their fault. They just lost the war. I mean.
And, well, get out from behind the freaking wall, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like, hi, all of us are running around like
Mhm.
people, why aren't you? Why are we still so willing to go help? Especially with the lack
Oh.
of information we had in that
It's
point.
not an
Why would
issue.
we-
It's not an issue of helping France, though
It
we
was
are
simply
helping
just
France.
communism.
Oh yeah, it's
Okay.
it's not an issue of France.
Okay.
It's domino theory.
Right.
If one country falls to communism, every other country will fall to communism. It's domino theory more than anything. Truman Doctrine, that was expelled in 1947, said that one of America's major goals is to prevent the spread of communism
Right.
anywhere
So
in the
that's
world.
totally what
That's
we
why we
focused
did it.
on.
That's
Okay.
why we did it.
Okay, because I was like, we went in so uninformed
And it didn't matter. I mean, the French were our consultants. They were going to tell us about the Vietnamese. And to be fair, I mean, we had Vietnamese allies.
right.
The South Vietnamese were our friends for some time. It just so happened that the majority of the country did not really like us too much. The key struggles between the Russians and the Americans are that of, just against communism versus democracy or capitalism. And that idea, we were talking about the Truman Doctrine. The Truman Doctrine is the policy of containment, written by George Kennan, also known as the X-Telegram. The basic idea is that we want to prevent the spread of communism as best we can, anywhere, and we will prevent it through military and financial means. So again, we gave billions of dollars to Germany and Turkey. Greece and Turkey, just to prevent the spread of communism. We sent money in Asia to prevent the spread of communism. We supported the Afghanis to prevent the spread of communism, and then we stopped supporting them.
So we're gonna hate us now.
That's part of it.
Get used to a certain way of life.
Yeah, that's part of it.
You gotta keep being my sugar mommy. So why do they call it the Iron Curtain?
Because Stalin means iron, the man of steel, or the man of iron. And so the basic idea was that behind the Iron Curtain, everything was communism.
Right.
And there was no literal Iron Curtain, but what it came down to was the borders of the eastern countries everything beyond that was communism. Everything to the west of that was democracies. A lot of this we will talk about in U.S. history. So I'll just touch on a little bit of this, and then because this is pretty much the U.S. history from this point on as well. And then what we'll do is we'll spend the last part of class today just going over documents just to make sure you guys are familiar.
Last time I took this first test, I had questions about the Iranian conflict.
1979?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about it?
I thought there was an end date to like how much world history we were spent. Like I thought it went up to World War II. On the world history test, it went up to World
Nope.
War II and then stopped.
No, it goes all the way. It goes all the way. Because even if you're teaching a world history class, you teach all the way up. You teach all the way to the Bosnian conflict.
Well, and that
And then-
stuff,
actually, yeah, you
luckily
talked
I
about
knew
it.
that stuff. You know, part of it was I had my history teacher in undergrad was involved in. Yeah, he was one of the Iranian hostages, so
Mhm.
brilliant man to have teaching it. So totally remember all that stuff.
Mhm.
But I just wasn't expecting it, so I was like, wait, what?
No, I mean, it goes all the way up. I mean, you have to go through Cold War. All the way through. I mean, assume that you go to the first Iraq War, Persian Gulf, and then that's where you should feel comfortable thereafter. But you have to know up to modern history, because you have to teach it. I mean, for the AP test, I have to teach all the way up to 9/11. So, I mean, I have to teach all the way up to that, and every year it just gets more and more and more. Eventually I have to talk about the Barack Obama administration. That's going to be on the test eventually as well. So here's the Iron Curtain, in case you guys were curious. The Iron Curtain is pretty much, again, Winston Churchill is the guy who named it, the Iron Curtain. Pretty much from Stettin to the Balkans. It's just pretty much from here all the way down. That's the Iron Curtain from there. You can just see that area. Actually, I'll just draw it for you. This right here is the Iron Curtain. All of that stuff, all of this,
Behind there.
communism. And that border was the Iron Curtain. And the idea was that nothing could pass through that. Democracy was forced on this side, and all pain, suffering, the fears were beyond the Iron Curtain. So Truman Doctrine, again, all of this stuff is U.S. history. So we'll talk about this.
Part of the test is also like, well, see how you can grasp concepts from world history to U.S. history and tie it together, which is why like U.S. history stuff is in world history.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, the nice part though is that you don't have to double study once you get to the Cold War, or once you get to World War I. It pretty much is world history, because U.S. just plays such a prominent role. But you guys just need to be familiar with all this stuff. This is all just U.S. history stuff. So I'm trying to see if there's anything else that I don't cover. But no, you'll actually cover all of this stuff in the U.S. history section. So last thing I do want to cover today then is just a few documents. I want to make sure you guys have that. So careful of lights. Apologize. I have several things to pass out to you guys. So the first thing is the scoring information of how one grades the essays. So I just want to make sure everyone sees what this looks like. So if you guys are curious about how you are scored on the essays, you will see. So the first thing we're going to look at here, if you go all the way down, is Section A, short focus response questions. Pretty much this is what they're going to be looking for. Purpose, subject matter knowledge, and support. So again, purpose, did you answer the question? Was it just like, if they're asking you for, I don't know, explain the different religions, and you talked about, well, you know, Jesus was a cool guy. That's not really answering the purpose. Subject matter knowledge, do you know what the topic is about? So, you know, if your topic is about Simón Bolívar and, you know, Latin American Revolution, you're like, well, Thomas Jefferson was fantastic when he did all these things. That's not answering the question. And then support. Can you list like 2 or 4 to 5 pieces of evidence? So, really what you guys need to look at, though, is the next page of the rubric. Here's how you get scored, in case you guys are curious. So, and again, this is always like, well, this is very vague and I don't know what this is asking for. That's okay, I'll narrow it down for you. To get a 3, which is the ideal, the 3 response reflects a command of relevant knowledge and skills as defined in the subject matter for CSES social science. So the purpose of the assignment is fully achieved. So pretty much, did you answer the question? So answer the question directly is what you write down first. Answer the question directly for the first bullet. There is an accurate application of relevant subject matter knowledge, and there is an appropriate and specific relevant supporting evidence. So number 2 bullet, stay on topic. And the third bullet, there is appropriate and specific relevant supporting information. My recommendation, 3 to 5 pieces of facts. 3 to 5 just hard facts. Facts can be dates, laws, people's names, regions, events. Just show me that you know what I'm talking about. So, I mean, if I said, tell me about the U.S. Constitution. Oh, well, it contains the First Amendment, which is the freedom of religion, and clearly it showed that America was trying to protect the freedoms of its people because of King George III. Second fact. And clearly it's because of what happened during the American Revolution, like the Quartering Act, that people felt compelled to protect their rights, which is also why we have the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms. And so I think that the Constitution was highly influenced by the colonial era. Pretty much just show me that you know what you're talking about. But I think that, again, remember, you guys haven't really studied pretty intensely yet. I think what it comes down to is that you have to. I mean, it's one of those things where I understand that. I mean, again, if that is the case, then you may want to consider taking it.
I can't. School won't let me. I have to pass it.
You have to pass it now? Then you have to study. You just have to
Yeah,
just.
but what
It's
are
so
I know.
obligations, like,
I know. It's not easy. But you just got to put some time out just to kind of buckle down and study it.
Is there a book that gives example answers?
Yeah, actually, I have them here right now.
Okay, great.
So I'll give you samples as well. Huh?
I have that Kaplan guide, whatever.
I think so.
Something. They give you like.
Sure.
Good writing stuff. Okay.
Is the Kaplan book for the CSET?
I don't know. Is that? I don't think it's.
It
Kaplan,
says
it's
it-
Cliff's. I have Cliff Notes or Cliff.
Is that
something.
for CSET though?
I have Kaplan's, and it's for the CSET. However, it almost seems like it's a multiple subjects test book, but they break it down into each area. So, do you know what it?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So, while it helps, yes, it's not a good depiction of what you're about
Sure.
to face type thing, because that's what I used the first time. And when I went to take it was like, and this was, coming into California, never taking the CSET, did the praxis, expecting something like the praxis, nothing like the praxis, just to get an idea. So that wouldn't recommend it.
Sure. Oh yeah, again, like I've had success with kids taking this test just using the resource I've given them. But again, if you have an idea of what I'm looking for and what they're looking for, I think you should be fine. If you're into the back page, there's a second essay, the extended question. It's the longer one. Don't let that fool you. It's like 2 paragraphs. Persia. Persia is always effective. Persia. Persia stands for political, economic, religious, social, international, and arts. Political, economic, religious, social, international, arts. If you're comparing anything, you should be able to compare them on at least 2 of these. So compare Thomas Jefferson and Gandhi. Well, politically, Gandhi tried to seek independence for India, whereas Thomas Jefferson tried to seek independence for America. And socially, they try to have human rights here and that there. This will give you a framework for comparison, because if I just told you compare Gandhi and Thomas Jefferson, you're like, what the hell am I supposed to talk about? Persia is your best friend.
Okay.
Persia will give you context. Persia will give you a way to organize your thoughts. If you can break things down to Persia, you should be fine for every
Well,
essay.
I've never had main players like that. I've always had 2 people that I'm like, I don't even think I've ever heard of these.
Sure. So I think what it comes down to is if they'll always give you some clues. It's like, well, here's...
Right, no, they'll give me like a date or an area they're from.
So
and
talk
then-
around it.
Okay.
Talk around those facts. You know roughly about it, so talk about that. Break it down to Persia. Well, clearly the Prussian General Code... Because again, I will give you a document right now. It includes the Prussian General Code, and I can tell you right now, when I took the test, I wouldn't know what the hell the Prussian General Code
You
was.
don't know what you're talking about.
I wouldn't know.
Okay.
But I think you get enough clues based on the text to say, well, I have an idea of what this is. And that's all you need, which is why, again, these books are fine, because you'll notice you don't need an in-depth understanding of any of these, because there's so much information and they know that. What you need is breadth. You need to understand a little bit of everything. You need to pull the main ideas out of everything. Because eventually what they're going to do is they're going to give you those state standards and say, compare these two things that you should be able to teach your kids. And again, one of them might be Mesopotamian fertile civilizations, and the other one might be, I don't know, World War II, and talk about, explain the rise of technology in these two time periods. They have nothing to do with each other. Say, oh, well, civilization was slash and burn, and, Nile rivers and blah, blah,
But see,
blah.
that I could do. For some reason, that's not as obscure as the question that they give me on this
I
test.
think what it may be is just, again, this mindset. Part of it is just when you go in and you know how you should be writing, it might make you a little bit more prepared. Because if you don't come in with a structure, or you don't compare with a strategy of how to write, then you'll write about anything. And sometimes that's not what they're looking for. If you write about Persia, politically, economically, religiously, socially, already you're giving them buzzwords they want to hear. Yeah, religious. Because, again, that religious question we're talking about. So those buzzwords are fantastic. So, turn to the next page. Here's one of the questions that were released from the CST, or CSAT. Confucianism and Taoism are the two main philosophical influences on development of Chinese thought and civilization. Discuss a shared feature of Taoism and Confucianism, and analyze a major difference between the two philosophical traditions.
Where is that?
Page 7. Just keep on turning. It's just a short
okay, got it.
section. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I should know.
I thought we were going in order.
Yeah, sorry. This is all you guys have to write the long answer, which is not a lot.
No.
If you write big, or not even, this is like 2 paragraphs, maybe 3, but that's it. Whereas this one, this is the short answer. That's a paragraph. You don't have time to be like, well, back in the days of China. You can't do that.
That's the problem I ran into. Like, it's been pounded into me to answer the question with part of
Sure,
the question.
don't do that.
And you can't.
No.
Because there's like,
Try
by the time I'm done writing the
try
question,
also
it's
writing
done.
on this. Try writing your practice on your packet first, and then when you're happy with it, write it into your thing after. That's what I did. Write it here. You have blank space, might as well write it. Outline it, then write it. Remember, guys, 4 to 5 facts, ideally, or 3 to 5 facts. So, what are they asking us to do? Discuss a shared feature and a difference between Taoism and Confucianism. So, yeah, so one comparison, one difference, okay? So let's see what a 3 gets. We're going to turn the page here. Confucianism and Taoism are both ancient Chinese philosophies. Taoism is a more mystical philosophy emphasizing an individual's quest for harmony with the natural world and a peaceful acceptance of the world and oneself. So they defined one of them. It is not really concerned with social institutions, but more with relinquishing concern with them, especially concerns with a power in favor of purity of heart that makes one's actions one with the Tao. Honestly, they would have been fine with just world and oneself. That second line is completely unnecessary. You would have already showed me you understand what the Tao is. Confucianism, on the other hand, is about the social world and its traditions, such as respect for elders and ancestors. Its laws and rules, which permeate every social interaction, are seen as essential to social harmony. The worldliness is very unlike Taoism. But ultimately, the sense of harmony is the goal of both philosophies. One is more worldly, one is more mystical, but they are more like aspects of single understanding than like opposing viewpoints. So, what they said they were similar, they're both Chinese philosophies. They both have a basic understanding of harmony, and they both are trying to develop a single understanding of society. The difference is, they just define them. That's not that hard. You guys can do that. But that's a 3. You don't even need a 3 to pass. You need a 2. 2 is all you need, so let's turn to the page. Put a star next to number 2, because this is all you need to do, guys. This is all you need. And by the way, you don't have to write as flowery as these samples, and to be like, and the enduring legacy of, no, who cares?
Well, and I think that's what threw me off. When I was studying for the first time, I used, their examples off.
Sure.
And some of it I'm like, what?
No.
Like, who writes like
Don't
this?
even bother writing that. Just be as direct as possible. If I said, look, Taoism was the basic knowledge of, focusing on harmony in society and trying to promote the wisest government possible. Confucianism was belief in ancestors. There was a belief in the afterlife, and it was very mystical. Ultimately, they were different because one was more focusing on harmony with government, while the other one was focusing on harmony with nature.
They're saying Taoism is more.
Oh yeah, the other way around. But yeah. But I mean, but the basic idea is that it doesn't have to be flowery. It's just get to the point.
Right.
And like I said, push come to shove, you should always write on your scratch paper first. Just write it all out. Okay. So look at question point score number 2 though. Here where you only use 2 points. That's the one that you need to do. Taoism and Confucianism are both Chinese ancient philosophies. They were both developed to bring order to troubled times during the rule of emperors. There's commonality. They both stressed harmony. Also commonality. So those are your similarities though. However, each taught that it could be reached through different methods. Taoists were supposed to find harmony in nature, while Confucians were supposed to find it by following rules at home and school. They were supposed to obey parents, teachers, older people, and the emperor. This would bring harmony and order to the people. This was needed because times were troubled and confused, and so rules and proper behavior were needed. So pretty much they just spent the majority of it discussing Confucianism because that's the one that they knew. And Taoism, I think I remember that roughly. But that's it. They're both about harmony. What do they talk about Taoism? Oh, it's about harmony in themselves and nature. That's it.
So if we were just to answer, like, Taoism is in regards to harmony within the government, Confucianism is in regards to this. Like, and making like a 4 sentence and answer the question, that gets that.
Yep, that'll get you a 2. Because this is not English. The goal is not to show grammar or show transition. It's just, can you show me that you understand the content? This is a content-based test. It's not essay-based in any way. It's, if I give you a question, can you tell me without multiple choice options what these things are? If you can, then you should be fine. And again, now, is it possible that you might unfortunately get a question that maybe you didn't study? Sure. So which is why I gave you guys the state standards. You should study all of those. Those are the ones that you guys should study. Don't study just random stuff. Study the state standards. That book will be random unless you study the state standards. And that's where...
Oh, no, I'm totally doing the standards and then index.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how you should do it.
It just, some of it is a little more brushed over.
Yes, I agree. I understand. I think part of it is that this is still a better supplement than buying like 5 different books. And that's the hard part, is that if you ultimately cannot find enough information there, then yeah, just go look online for a little bit. But the problem with going online is that you open yourself up to way more information.
Right, well, and that's
you
my
need.
hesitation. Like, at one point I was like, yeah, I'm using Google, but then I was like, oh my gosh, so I'm going to get bombarded with stuff, and then I'm going to start...
Yeah, and which
reading
is
again,
a
and I feel-
dangerous thing.
Right.
So again, I prefer the coffee books because for the most part they give you just enough. You're right, in some areas, is there want? Sure.
Right.
But I think that for the most part, the information is there. And again, if there's a question like that where you do need more information, let me know.
Okay.
And I'll always just email you back.
I can bombard you with
Oh,
email.
of course. That's fine. Lastly, here's what gets you 1 point. Confucianism and Taoism are both Chinese religions. They're not even ancient. They are both very old. They have both influenced Buddhism in the course of history. Confucianism is more old-fashioned, but Taoism is still very popular. Confucianism teaches you to obey orders, while Taoism teaches you to look at yourself. And that still got a 1. That didn't even get a 0. That still got a 1. So again, like, provide...
Not answer the question.
It didn't really, but it still said, oh, we kind of knows about it. So really define the terms. If all else fails, if you find terms that I know what Taoism is, define them. Usually that's what they're asking for, define these things. Here is the long response then. They will give you 2 texts.
See, this is what they did to me.
Yes, but this is what they'll always do. They'll give you 2 primary sources, and they'll ask you to compare. One is the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, and one is the Prussian General Code. Things you should understand is that clearly based on this, you should be aware of the French Declaration of Rights. You should know this based on the state standards. Prussia, you should know, is Germany. Prussia is old Germany. So this is something that you guys will learn if you guys go over the textbook and you do some studying. But Prussia is Germany, and as some of you guys will eventually learn, Prussia and Germany have always had a militaristic history. Very militaristic history. But even if you didn't know that, you can tell based on these documents alone what's different here. Using the information presented in the 2 passages and your knowledge of world history, analyze the factors and events that shape the development of the views expressed in the passages above. So we know that France happened. So men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions may be based only on common utility. Liberty consists in the ability to do whatever does not harm another. I mean, this is all about rights. So maybe John Locke. natural rights, right? You would talk about that in the first one. American Revolution. That influenced the French. And the other one, the rights of a man arise from his birth, from his estate, from actions and arrangements which he laws of associated terms determine fact. For birth, make up together a state of the state, nobility of the first estate, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Pretty much comes down to is that there's inheritance of land there as well. So you can kind of gather that as well, but again, you might be lacking what the hell is Prussia. So even in that situation, you should still be able to pass this even with some knowledge. So let's look at score number 4 here on page 18. The government of France prior to the revolution was autocratic and based on the theory of the divine right of kings. The system crushed the masses of the people under... Actually, you know what? Let's just read point 3 because that's a much better option. So see how someone got a 3 on this. That's better. The government in France before the French Revolution was controlled by an absolute monarch who strengthened his power by employing the divine right theory. This is stuff that you guys should learn as you guys are going through the book. Members of the first and second estate held many special privileges such as being exempt from taxes. Everyone else in French society made up the underprivileged class of the third estate. So you should just be basically familiar with the basics of the French Revolution, which again, you guys will learn if you go through the books. By 1789, French kings had bankrupted the government through extravagant living and expensive wars. The members of the Third Estate had had enough. They declared themselves to be the National Assembly, which issued the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, proclaiming that all Frenchmen were born free and equal. So what you could have just done there pretty quickly is the people were fed up with the king and the absolute monarch. They demanded democracy for themselves, and so they issued the Declaration of Rights of Man, giving themselves born free and equal. A lot of this influenced by John Locke and natural rights. You don't have to talk about all this weird backgroundy stuff. Just go directly to, why did they do it? Quickly, why did they do it? Why did they, write the Declaration of Man?
Well, because I'm looking at this, and they may think they can fit this all in this nice little...
And you can't. No, you can't. You can't. This is way too much writing.
Yeah, there's no way. I don't care how small you write, because I have written uber tiny,
Yeah.
and you still don't have enough.
This is too much. Again, like we said, 2 paragraphs, maybe 3.
Normal
Tops.
writing,
Yeah.
about
There's no way you're getting a 5-paragraph essay in there. But anyway, the Prussian General Code could not have been more different. It affirmed the nobles' military power and land ownership and elite social position, which was theirs by virtue of their noble birth. In return, the nobility gave continued support and loyalty to the monarch. The middle class was expressly forbidden to own noble property, while the nobility was expressly forbidden to go into business. This describes a static, hierarchical society. It protected the safety of the status quo. You see that last paragraph there? All of that could be interpreted from the document.
Yeah.
Right.
So, provided that you know about the French Revolution, which you should. That's a pretty key thing. The other thing was, look, you should know about the French Revolution, write about that. But the other thing, you should be able to interpret on your own. So write what you know, but make sure you still mention both documents. Even if you just interpret exactly what's there. Just analyze it. If you can't bring out outside information, then so be it. But you should be able to bring in some outside information. So when you read a document like this, what I always tell my students, when you read the primary sources, right next to it, just immediately think, French Declaration of Rights of Man, what does that immediately remind me of? John Locke, natural rights, French Revolution. There's your 3 facts right there. Write about those things. You're done. The other thing, just analyze exactly what it's saying. If you can do facts for both, then great. But if you can't, just show me that you understand some of it and you can analyze the other one. Push come to shove, just being able to analyze documents is better than doing nothing.
Right.
Okay? So make sure you analyze the documents, because if you don't analyze the documents, then it's likely that you won't talk about the documents. That's the other problem that people have. They'll write about stuff that has nothing to do with what the documents are about. The same thing is true for 2 and 1, so you guys can kind of see those, but ultimately what it comes down to is just, you should know. You will likely get a geography question of some kind. Here's just an example of maps. How does one portray one better than the other? And again, you can find the answers and so explain why. So there's just samples of that. But getting you guys ready for essay, might be pictures. Some of the documents might be like poems, speeches, text. So you will use those to kind of answer that general question as practice. This one is about religion. So you asked about, I know, there's different formats. I've scoured the internet, because again, I don't teach world history.
Okay.
So I've had to scour the internet just looking for documents for you guys.
Okay,
But
so this is just showing us different documents.
yes, but the question's on the front still.
Is there an AP World History?
There
Yeah.
is, but it's not aligned to state standards. It's not. The problem with AP World History is that it talks about ancient history and African. It's a good class to take. The problem is that to prepare your students for the state standards, it's not sufficient, because most of world history, the test, is European history, because we're a Eurocentric society. Should we change that? Of course, but right now the test does not align. So I usually recommend that people take AP World History as a senior, as an elective. There's always an option. And so our school offers it for freshmen. I don't like that we do that, just because I don't feel like, one, they're ready to take that course, but two, it confuses them.
The high school that I went to for ninth graders, they offered world geography honors instead of AP World, and you could take AP World your sophomore year.
Right. Well, for me, I teach AP US, so I like the fact that before the sophomore year is AP European History, so it goes into AP US, and then it goes to AP Government. Because those three actually align very well together, because the philosophies of AP European History actually fit AP US History. I don't have to reteach a lot. The major question here is, again, is it Middle Ages? Should it be called the Dark Ages, Age of Faith, Age of Feudalism, or Golden Age? Which is the appropriate name based on the documents? So again, same thing, analyze the documents. Which one would you agree most with?
Sure.
And
No, this is a little unrelated, but going back to something you said earlier, like this is, distinctly remember like an 8th grader telling me at some point they found this boring, they couldn't relate it to like actual current events, but it's so easy to relate.
Oh, yeah.
Especially, like this faith and feudalism.
Yeah, I think if you're a good teacher,
Yeah.
it should be fine. I have been fortunate to always have good history teachers. I have never had a bad history teacher when I was in high school, so I loved all of my history teachers. I mean, that's probably why I became so passionate about it, as I knew I was going to teach it right away. Other people hated their history teachers, and as a result, they became passionate about it. Like, how can you teach it so horribly when it's so fantastic? Because it became a hobby for people. But no, I agree that everything is pretty relatable. I mean, again, I always joke, again, when kids read, you say YOLO, I say it's Carpe Diem. It's been around for years. Renaissance.
Okay, so if they're asking us to describe the relationship between religion and social and political order in Mesopotamia and Egypt, social and political order are dependent on the religion.
Sure.
Okay, so that's what I.
Oh yeah, because
so I want to make sure, like.
it shaped it. I mean, again, the social order was shaped. The guy who was appointed by the gods as king. Priests are next. People that farm are after that. I mean, religion dictated everything.
Right. I just said the people of Mesopotamia and Egypt believed everything happened because of the gods, so they made sure that their social and political actions were only to please the gods and in line with what the gods expected.
And then you have to talk about the structure, though. King is up top. Priests, nobles, farmers. Here's another Renaissance DBQ.
The one that we saw about, like, I wanted to ask, I kind of felt dumb, but I'm gonna ask it.
Oh, please. By all
For the Prussia one, like, when I first saw it, I thought of, like, the caste system, like,
Sure.
the ancient civilizations. If I were to compare it to that, would it have been
It
adequate
depends
for it?
on the question.
Yeah, that's just what I saw.
Should development of the views. I think that you can say it's like, but I wouldn't go into too much detail about it.
Okay.
Because what it might be is that they think that you're filling in because you don't know. So it's always if you can analyze that document and you throw in very much like the caste systems of blah 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 blah, then that's okay. But if you go into too much detail about those caste systems, I think that
I'm gonna think that might be.
yeah, you're just filling words in. That's imperialism in Africa, and this is World War I. You guys, we didn't go into too much of World War I today. Huh?
These aren't overwhelming at all.
I know, we're just kidding. No.
I mean, I appreciate all the resources.
Yeah,
I
and
can
you don't
get.
have to use, I mean, again, you don't have to use any of this, but I think that, again, and this is more preparation than I had when I took the CSET. I mean, I just read the books, and I used the state standards. But again, I would have liked at least having some documents, because I didn't know what to expect when I took that test. I'm like, what document? This website, this stuff wasn't even online. But it wasn't even online when I took the test. This didn't exist when I took the test. I just took the test.
The history example test has 15
Yeah.
multiple choice questions on it.
Yeah,
That's
no,
it.
not great. I mean, this is why I built the tests.
And
I had to
like-
build those tests because they don't have samples for you guys. And the Zamtion, real quick.
Right now, just
I got it, so
A little while ago.
I'm not doing the U.S. history, but can I come in case I have any questions?
Of course.
I'll do it after class. But.
Again, I know that it's a lot to ask you guys to read chapters 1 through 10 first. No, I know it's a lot. No, but I'm telling you what I'm covering.
Okay, I'm just gonna go to summaries.
Yeah, so you don't have to. I mean, what I'm saying is that just like if you wanted to know what was going to be covered, chapters 1 through 10 is going to be the next session. 11 to 21 is the next section, and then 22 to 30 is the last section. That's pretty much how I break the book down. So that book is pretty helpful, though, because it gives you everything that you need. Whereas, unfortunately, there is no good world history CSET book. It's 3 books you have to buy, which is why the coffee book is the best option. Otherwise, you're going to spend $200.
Oh, I've already spent well over that.
Yeah, and
It's
so-
just, it's like, okay, well, this book didn't work. You know, it wasn't
Let
a
me
good
try this
depiction.
one.
Yeah, let me
It's
try
and
this
that's a
one.
frustration,
Let
and
me-
so
oh,
I
it's horrible.
I would
That's
hate that
it.
too.
90% of it was butting my head against the wall because it was, I'm sitting here going, tell me what to use as a tool. Not give me the answers, tell me what tools to use, and nobody had any answers. So it was
Right.
like you were just running into the wall over and over, and it was like, well, that was a crappy tool, well, that was a crappy tool.
Yeah,
well,
which
that
again,
was
I would understand the frustration.
and
So
it
again,
was like, so,
if you guys have any questions at all, again, please let me know. If you guys run into any snags on any of the documents as you guys are going through it. And again, even when the class is over, if you guys are still preparing, just feel free to email
I
me.
guess at this point now I'm
I'll
not
let you guys know.
thinking enough into the answers.
I think it just depends. But
Okay,
yeah.
when it says identify the locations of